Storm clouds gather over Europe. Mistrust and rivalries between realms threaten to break and flood the world in a tide of total war.
Is Medieval 2 the perfect Total War game? If one game has defined the entirety of the Total War series, it has to come down to none other than Medieval 2. Releasing in November 2006, Medieval 2 assumed the throne left by Rome, another massive gem. Medieval 2 both built on the excellent foundations of Rome and introduced entirely new mechanics itself, and together, they made for the Total War games I could not get enough of, despite perhaps a few flaws here and there. If you're like me and absolutely love this game, make sure to leave your own thoughts on Medieval 2 in the comments, because this is personal. If you ask any fan of strategy games what their favorite time period is, you're likely to get a plurality saying the Middle Ages. And it's not weird really. The Middle Ages is all over media, and is the epicenter of conflicts and state formations that still impact us today. We're talking an age of awesome knights and castles, kings and princesses, new empires and old, the all-importance of religion and conflicts based on them, and much more. Medieval 2 encompasses all of this, at least to some degree, while of course keeping to the Total War formula. And that leads us to the first thing that meets us in this beautiful game, the main menu. My god, I spent a lot of time looking at this thing, and not just for the bold and dark color palette. Total War used to do this thing where the main menu was animated, with soldiers marching forever towards war, none of them recognizable by face, and yet all of them a part of a larger whole. What made it perfect was the soundtrack, a mix of two actually, which set the mood for the entire experience, and you can tell how much I love this by the fact that I'm spending time talking about the literal main menu here. Medieval 2 in many aspects follows in the footsteps of Rome. In the beginning, we have a mere 5 available playable factions here, but it's likely the ones most players will want to begin with. The European players anyway, which this game was obviously targeted at first and foremost. Honestly, I don't know which faction of these 5 I like the most, but I know my most played is the Holy Roman Empire, and for a very simple reason.
Ja, mein Kaiser!
Medieval 2's foundations are recognizable even now, almost 19 years later. You move armies around the map and have cities dotting it. But there are a few key differences here, namely the systems of the Total Wars of old, before the days of Rome 2, of which Medieval 2 certainly is a part. The campaign map is your playground in Medieval 2, and somehow, even though this is a game from 2006, I still find it so beautiful to look at. I can't really put my finger on it, but there is something about the Total War maps that predate Rome 2 that just seems clearer and more readable to me. Don't get me wrong, I mostly love the map itself in Rome 2 as well, but with Medieval 2 for example, there's something about the colors, about the overview, about the lack of certain effects or flickering that is just much easier to look at. Even though the map is rather small for today's standards, it continues to be densely populated with cities and hotspots, and I love the innovation of trade goods which you can actually use by placing merchant agents on them. The trade carts and ships further makes this map so good to look at, and I would never want to be without the sense of life this brings to the experience. It all crescendos with the inclusion of the beautiful soundtrack of course, and I maintain that Medieval 2 offers the best music in the entire series. I still believe the Medieval 2 map to be timeless, and even though mods have made this map so much more beautiful and detailed, I do enjoy the basic version too. What's especially awesome here is how Medieval 2 deals with scope. The game takes place between 1080 and 1530, a decent chunk of time. For the vast majority of the game, Europe, North Africa, and the Near East is everything we know, and is the clear focus of the game. But much later, something quite incredible happens. America is discovered, and we suddenly have an entirely new theater of war to fight over. It's magically hidden at the very edge of the original map, and even though the Americas is certainly underdeveloped, I love this feature for its sheer existence. A lot happens during this campaign to make it so much more dynamic than many other Total Wars out there. Massive events like the Mongol invasion, the Black Plague, and the invention of gunpowder turns the Medieval 2 campaign on its head by not only introducing new threats, but also ways of dealing with them. The cities of Medieval 2 is where everything happens. Not only is it where you tax your population on a city-by-city basis, but every city has the ability to raise virtually every building in the game. This means there's no province system, no capital city and small villages. Instead, every city has the potential to be tiny villages and massive metropoles, building roads, farms, markets, churches, and ports to facilitate growth and public order. Because of this decentralized and granular system, I prefer it so much more than the new province system with restricted building slots, as Medieval 2 continues to provide that sense of roleplay on a strategic scale. Having actual population numbers aids this feeling further, even though it might come across as just a vibes thing. And the various menus provides even more insight into how your cities and towns are doing. Religion is of course an important part of the Middle Ages, and Medieval 2 is no exception. Every faction belongs to a religion, but contrary to Rome's barbarian invasion or Total War Attila, there's no internal conversion here. Every character belongs to either Catholicism, Orthodoxy, Islam, paganism, or they're simply heretics. Characters cannot convert, but they do have a piety mechanic which essentially tells you how religious they are. On the other hand, cities can be converted, and they're done so through either religious buildings of other faiths or through missions by priests and imams. Since religion is directly tied to public order, it's vital to make good use of religious agents. What's more though, is that Medieval 2 offers arguably the most powerful war mechanic in all of Total War, Crusades and Jihads, and this ties into the Pope mechanic. It's actually kind of funny, because when you look at it, the Papal and Cardinal system of Medieval 2 is almost a shot-for-shot copy-paste of the Senate system in Rome. Here, a select group of high piety priests are made cardinals. This means that any Catholic country with a good enough priest may house a cardinal. This is important because having cardinals and being faithful Christians, i.e. listening to the Pope and building churches, gives you cross points. The more crosses, the more the Pope likes you, and the less likely you are of being excommunicated by the Pope. Seeing as the Pope comes from one of the Catholic countries, being at war with said country will have the Pope hate you and vice versa, so there's definitely politics and stake involved here. But when the Pope dies, one of the cardinals has a chance of becoming the new Pope, and that gives you a chance to take revenge and get back into the good graces of His Holiness. The Pope is never directly controlled by you though, your crosses do let you influence him. With enough of them, you can ask the Pope to call a crusade against one of the many eligible cities around the world. And it's not just Jerusalem either, but any city deemed valid, be it a Muslim or excommunicated Christian one, might be granted. The crusade is a massively important event in Medieval 2 as it calls on every Catholic nation to take up the cross and advance on the target city and faction. Every general with at least 8 units may join the crusade, giving them a large boost to movement points, powerful traits, and allows them to recruit special crusader mercenaries to pad their armies further. Importantly, the army does not cost any gold in upkeep, but the units might desert if you're not making enough progress towards the crusade target every turn. But the best thing about the crusade is of course the event video, which is nothing short of legendary.
The Holy Bible may preach peace, but when it is Christendom itself that is threatened, then it is every Christian's duty to defend all that is holy. His Holiness the Pope has called a crusade to reclaim the Holy Lands from the infidel, who would deny Christian pilgrims their right to visit the holy places. It is time for the armies of Christendom to put aside their differences and unite under one banner, the sign of the cross, and give back God's children what is rightfully theirs, or die trying.
Catholic nations aren't the only ones with religious war fun times though, as Muslims have the jihad. There's no pope in Islam, but every Muslim nation with a powerful enough imam may call a jihad on an infidel city, and it works the same way as the Crusades once called. Even though I love playing as Byzantium, it's kind of sad they have no way of joining in on the fun, since they are Orthodox. But then again, the Byzantines don't need all that to have fun. As we know, there's no party like a Byzantine party, because the Byzantine party don't stop. Mostly because their campaign is one long struggle to retake the empire, both in the east and the west of course. Medieval 2 enhances your campaigns further by adding missions and guilds. Missions might be given to you by a council of nobles to conquer a foreign city or initiate diplomatic relations with another faction, and will in turn send you gold or units if you've done well. The Pope might also ask you to build churches or stop warring against another faction to keep the peace between Catholics. This can of course be a little annoying if you're on the verge of destroying another faction and the Pope calls on you to make peace lest you be excommunicated. One of my personal favorite features though is the guild system. Medieval 2 has a system where guilds, belonging to one aspect of society, will offer their services to you. For example, a merchant guild might offer to establish a guild in a city focusing on economics and trade, a thieves guild might do the same in a place where we've recruited many spies or assassin agents, and my personal favorite, either the Knights Templar, Hospitaller, Santiago, or Teutonic Knights may found an order in your cities, letting you recruit their knights. If you continue to invest into the particular fields, they may upgrade the guild, and even though there may be several small or medium-sized ones, there can only be one guild headquarters per guild in the entire world, and I love the race towards achieving that. The Medieval 2 campaign is not without its faults, of course. The AI is unpredictable at best, with certain factions like Milan hard-coded to be absolute backstabbers, and Portugal often showing up as invaders in Ireland. The AI also seems to have a special eye just for you. I guess that makes you feel special, huh? Other than for trade rights or map information, you never want to rely on the AI too much either. In terms of historical accuracy, Medieval 2 is quite the massive sinner. Here we have factions like a fully centralized Holy Roman Empire, a Spain, and the egregious lack of Norway even though it's on the map, and this follows again in the footsteps of Rome, where a certain present or modern take on this medieval world simplifies history. Ideally, all of this would be fixed in a Medieval 3, where our faction diversity and depth would pay this time period the complexity and attention to detail it deserves. I'd also like to see a much more intricate religious system, an actual feudal system portraying the massive amounts of vassals under more or less powerful kings and emperors, formable nations, a return to the individual city system and away from unimmersive provinces, and government systems that actually makes it a vastly different experience to play as Catholics, Orthodox, Muslims, or even pagans, or perhaps even Protestants if the Medieval 3 game goes that far. But the one place where Medieval 2 still excels like arguably no other is in its battles. How Creative Assembly managed to create its best system ever and never truly replicated, I don't know, but Medieval 2 battles just feel amazing. It comes down to a handful of points. Medieval 2 battles looked amazing for its time. Each unit was now individually modeled amongst a handful, making Rome Total War look positively ancient in comparison. But while age has dulled the visuals somewhat, the game still feels great. Units really look like they are fighting each other, mixing between generic animations and scripted killing blows, making for battle scenes perhaps only matched by Shogun 2 or something. These visuals and the sense of progression was further enhanced by the fact that what happened on the campaign so clearly influenced the units on the battlefield. Not only can units level up, but we can upgrade their arms and armor, and these upgrades have an actual visual change on the battlefield. This is actually insane and such a beautiful detail, and again, has never been re-implemented in a Total War game since. A massive shame to say the least, although perhaps not as relevant in later time periods. Further, Medieval 2's battle maps somehow felt so organic and realistic. The locations you fought reflected those on the campaign map, an inclusion of two different types of siege battles, be it cities, which were much easier to siege, or actual castles, which could come to house not only one but two inner walls, were absolute nightmares to attack. But it was fun as heck, and actually demanded more of you since taking a castle, a fortress, or a citadel meant fighting tough as nails battles. Siege battles were made so much better than in Rome, by the way, particularly due to better pathfinding, but also because again, things just felt better. Units accurately fired from the walls, those massive trebuchets tossed fiery rocks like no other, and due to the technological developments, what began as impenetrable citadels developed over time into something we can overcome due to the sheer power of the almighty cannon. I mean, Medieval 2 has us begin with peasant armies, but end with heavily armored knights and even musket-carrying gunners, symbolizing how dynamic and all-encompassing the time period between 1080 and 1530 really is. I also appreciate the difference in units per faction. You'll obviously see many of these same units all over Western Europe, for example, focusing on knights and the like, but we have important differences. England will sport the best longbowmen, France and the Holy Roman Empire will offer the best knights, and in the east, Egypt, the Turks, and the Mongols deliver some impressive light and archer cavalry units, making for a diverse battlefield as long as you focus on your strengths. Something I personally miss a lot in the latest Total War games, by the way, are the individual unit abilities. I loved having my spearmen assume different formations and have archers put down pikes, and kind of the only later Total War game that replicated this is Pharaoh Dynasties, which is partly why I really love it. Medieval 2's battles have so many strengths in, despite its age, and Creative Assembly desperately needs to take a good hard look at itself to re-implement some or all of its features. Medieval 2 continues to be in my personal top 3 Total War games because of its fine wine aging. Rome has not aged nearly as well, and after its launch, so many games were either buggy or limited in scope. But Medieval 2 struck a near-perfect balance between it all, and the sheer amount of mods out there, which greatly enhances the game in every way by the way, shows how much this game was loved, and how much room there was for modding here. Compared to the modern games, Medieval 2 might deliver a much smaller map. And that might be a bit jarring if you're coming from Attila, Rome 2, or even Warhammer 3 or Pharaoh Dynasties. But overall, Medieval 2 still delivers that wonderful experience, albeit in a smaller format than we might be used to today. And again, if you're using mods, like the Stainless Steel Historical Improvement Project, or Medieval 2 Kingdoms Grand Campaign, Medieval 2 becomes so much more fantastic, and truly unlocks a potential only Medieval 3 can surpass. It's become the norm for Total War games to receive a handful of smaller DLC packs and a few larger expansions that add content and new campaigns to the game. But there was a time in Total War history when the games received no more than 1 or 2 expansion packs, and during that time, the only expansion for Medieval 2, namely Kingdoms, was truly revolutionary. It brought 4 entire unique campaigns at the same time, allowing us to take part in some of the most exciting conflicts of the age. The Kingdoms even brought with it Total War's most game-changing feature ever in my opinion, namely a Hotseat mechanic, which would change my opinion of Total War forever, and have me miss that feature more than any. According to the legendary Total War scholar Andy's Take, aka myself, there's a before and an after the Medieval 2 Kingdoms expansion. Before Kingdoms, Total War had only really delved into larger maps and locations. Sure, you got much of Europe and the Middle East, but the land masses themselves weren't the biggest. Yeah, looking at you, Alexander's Greece. Kingdoms was the first Total War expansion to truly dive into smaller locations but expand the scope of the landmasses. Yes, I do know Viking Invasion did the same, but Kingdoms does it on a whole nother scale. So quiet you. Kingdoms took a deep dive like never before into the medieval world of Total War, offering 4 different campaigns in one package. And let's start with a banger, shall we? The Crusades campaign. The Crusades campaign takes place during perhaps the quintessential period of the medieval era and begins right before the Third Crusade. We find ourselves solely on the border between Europe and Asia here, as the campaign map stretches from Constantinople in the west to Baghdad in the east, and from Georgia in the north to Egypt in the south. It's a beautiful map at that, and you'll definitely feel the different vibe when playing as the Orthodox Byzantines in the north or the Ibid Egyptians in the south. But the star of the show arguably remains the Kingdom of Jerusalem, the Christian Crusader state established after the First Crusade 100 years prior to the campaign itself. Along with the Principality of Antioch, they are the only new factions in the campaign, as you could actually play as the Byzantines, Egypt, and the Turks in the original Medieval 2 campaign as well. I find that so much comes together in this campaign. The music has been changed to sound much more Middle Eastern, the map looks warm and sunny, and the fact that we're only located in the east gives the whole campaign a sense of being in faraway lands compared to the original Grand Campaign. Part of the fun in the Kingdoms campaigns is that you're not really starting from scratch as you do in Medieval 2. Your cities are larger from the beginning, and so are your armies, even offering you knights from the get-go. The Crusades campaign offers you Varangian guards as the Byzantines, for example, Ghulams for Egypt right from the start, or Knights of Jerusalem for the Kingdom. One of the coolest aspects of Kingdoms is that it also added special characters and events that never occurred in the original campaign. Egypt begins with the legendary Sultan Saladin, and to simulate the Third Crusade, the Crusader states receives emerging armies from the homeland, so Richard the Lionheart becomes an available character, for example. In addition, you should never feel safe as the Byzantines, as a certain Fourth Crusade will pop up at the historically appropriate time and threaten to destroy everything you hold dear if you're not careful. As I've stated several times on this channel, one of my favorite Total War memories, and the feature that made me play these games 10 times as much as I normally would have, is the Hotseat mechanic. Hotseat is a feature in many strategy games that allows you to play with several people on the same computer. It's a perfect feature for turn-based strategy games because you can actually take turns playing, so it doesn't really diminish the experience. The only caveat is that you can't play battles against your fellow players simultaneously, but that's an insignificant price to pay. Either way, Hotseat allowed me and my friends to cooperate as the Crusader states and the Byzantine Empire at the same time, preparing for hostile invasions and other dangers, and it really made this campaign that much more exciting. It's extremely hard to say which of the Kingdoms campaigns I love the most, the Crusades or this next one, which really took more familiar factions to the next level.
Britannia, a land of emerald isles, a land of kings, a land of war. England. King Henry sits upon a hungry throne, thirsty for more land. The Norwegians, warriors happy to pay the blood price for their ambitions. Britannia, one realm, 5 kings, total war.
Ah, the Britannia campaign, and the soundtrack, which is just so beautifully iconic. The Britannia campaign takes place solely in the British Isles on an absolutely massive map of England, Wales, Scotland, Ireland, and yes, the glorious islands held by Norway. This campaign felt extra close to me because Norway had never been a playable faction in any Total War game I'd ever played. Now, it is true that Viking Invasion for the original Medieval did in fact include Norway itself, which would have made Britannia even better, but I'll hold my complaints here. Britannia felt lively and colorful, and for such a small place it actually housed many different factions, all clearly distinguishable in terms of units, specialties, challenges, and starting locations. Playing as England made you feel like a grand empire, yet one struggling to keep your own kingdom intact while keeping the Norwegians and Scots at bay and trying to hold on to unruly territory in Ireland. The Scots, on the other hand, is a minor but established faction, capable of holding their own and advancing on England should they want to do so. And the Norwegians, located quite all over the north, is a faction relying on the sea for protection, but if able to consolidate its armies, can be made into quite a powerful force. Here too we have special and awesome events, such as the emergence of William Wallace for the Scots, which will fire depending on several factors, Norway will receive reinforcements from the homeland, and England can send Prince Edward on a crusade, which, when he returns, brings home a crusading army along with much more experience. The battles were fun too, and I really liked how they made these factions rely on different strengths. The English of course have their knights and cavalry, while the Scots rely on their noble Highland pikemen. The Norwegians offer heavy infantry carrying two-handed swords, the Welsh have excellent bowmen, and the Irish serve off some mean skirmisher units that can tear any army apart from afar. The battles remain fun because of these unique faction strengths and weaknesses, and I think that's crucial to give such a small location this much spice. Britannia is definitely a somewhat smaller campaign than the Crusades, yet one with just as much personality. I particularly love the updated castle models here, which is something that was never changed for the Crusades campaign for some reason. Now come the campaign I find the least exciting, yet one that still has something to offer. My least favorite is the Teutonic campaign, which is centered around the Baltic Sea. The Teutonic Order wages a crusade against the pagan Lithuanians here, who must either withstand the Catholics or accept conversion, but there are other playable factions too. The Danes in the north have the ability to form the Kalmar Union if they conquer all of Scandinavia, and Novgorod in the east gives you the chance to take the principality further west. The Teutonic campaign definitely feels like the darkest one, if not for the subject matter itself. But I also feel like it's the blandest, perhaps due to the many factions taken straight from vanilla, the map which looks rather hastily put together, or perhaps the setting itself. And now comes the last campaign, but definitely not the least innovative. In fact, the Americas campaign is perhaps the most standoutish of them all, offering a campaign of massive differences. Here you get to play as Aztecs and Mayans, two Native American factions that play quite like the Old World factions, but with different strengths and weaknesses. The Apache tribe to the north are perhaps the most interesting here, offering various light infantry and cavalry troops, yet one that can actually make use of Western weapons. And then there's Spain, the faction with the best soldiers, but also the least men, meaning one has to be clever to survive. Further, since the entirety of the map is uncharted territory to each of the factions, much of the campaign map is shrouded in complete darkness until it's been explored, meaning that the Americas campaign offers a lot more mystery and surprise than the others. The vastly different units and fighting styles, including the late-era units of the Spanish conquistadors, which include gunpowder units and cannons, really makes for some of the most dynamic battles in the entire game. And I love that Kingdoms actually included an Americas campaign, which in many ways is a poetic way to close out both this game and its era. In many ways, Kingdoms plays just like the original campaign, adding very little in terms of actual campaign mechanics or features. But what it does add is noticeable, especially because it's so in your face. Detailed new maps of important flashpoints of the medieval era, cool new events and characters that change up campaigns, especially the first time you play them, is a big deal. Add some cool new factions, actual historical events and characters, and the fact that each of these campaigns are much more intense than the original Grand Campaign, and you have yourself a handful of campaigns that are perfect to play alone or indeed with your friends in Hotseat mode, which I so wish would make a return to the Total War series. At least give us concurrent multiplayer, please. Kingdoms is so beloved by the fans for a reason. It not only brought so much new content to an already legendary game, but allowed us for the first time to play Total War campaigns with friends. And for that, it's probably one of the best Total War expansion packs ever made, and it's well worth playing even now. Of course, Medieval 2's story doesn't end there. In fact, almost 2 decades later, the game's life continues on mobile devices courtesy of Feral Interactive, Creative Assembly's resident wonder workers. The fact that Medieval 2 now can be played in the palm of your hand feels like a miracle, but the question is of course whether the game plays well and satisfyingly so. The awesome thing about Medieval 2 is that just like Rome, it's a fairly straightforward game, but with deep mechanics that make even the base game interesting. Medieval 2 is one of the most beloved in this series, but that is on PC of course, and the question is obviously whether this whole campaign and the battles work well in your hands. And well, I'd actually say it works as well as you could possibly hope for, and that's bigger praise than you might think. So let's get straight to it. There's definitely a learning curve going into Medieval 2 Mobile, as everything you can easily do with a mouse pointer must now be done with your fingers, unless of course you do connect a mouse and keyboard to your device. If you wish to construct a building for example, you can now either double tap or hold your finger on the chosen city, then click on the construct icon and then choose your building, again holding over the chosen one to see its details. The steps aren't necessarily that much more complex than in the PC version, but when holding this game in your hand, you might find yourself clicking the wrong things every now and then, a fact which is made much less relevant on the bigger screen of an iPad. But constructing buildings is actually the easy part. The somewhat more complex part is moving your armies around, which is done like this. An army is tapped like you would a mouse click, but then you need to tap on the chosen location and then tap the OK sign to actually go there. Alternatively, holding down instead of double tapping is also an option. To merge armies or navies, the units or armies must be selected, and then you must remember to hold your finger on the other to merge them, then click the corresponding OK sign. In other words, the game has you alternate between sometimes tapping, in addition to always demanding that you confirm your action. And while it absolutely can slow down time and makes turns take a bit longer, it's also a completely understandable move, as tapping wrong and doing something you didn't want to do and then being unable to undo it would probably be a much worse outcome. I actually prefer the holding method though, as it seems a bit more reliable and is less taxing on my knightly fingers. However, it could have been a nice option in the menu to cut away the need for an OK icon, just to see if the game would flow better. Medieval 2 for mobile even lets you choose your own faction heir, which is something the original did not allow for. What's more is that the guild system has been much improved with the increased transparency, allowing us to actually see how likely it is that a guild becomes available in a city. These changes are actually really awesome, and coupled with the high resolution and honestly really awesome UI, Medieval 2 has arguably never been better. You further get every settlement detail readily available in the windows, and the game is overall good at providing information. On the whole then, the campaign in Medieval 2, whether it's setting your taxes, conquering settlements, erecting buildings or conducting diplomacy, is so straightforward and easy to comprehend as concepts and tangible actions that the mobile format manages to retain every positive aspect and even improve them. I also really like the fact that this is Medieval 2 as you remember it in all its glory, so you actually have to conquer and destroy your enemies in order to play them in the campaign. I've tested this campaign on iPhones back to iPhone 10, and the campaign map runs perfectly well and even looks quite sharp to boot on all of these. But one of the best things about Medieval 2 are the awesome battles where we really get to prove once and for all who the better commander is, and is what likely will draw the attention of a lot of players. And you know, the battles are actually really awesome, even when playing with touch controls and without a mouse. It did take me a few tries to really get into things, and from the get-go, I was quite confused on how to do things like position and selection. But luckily, Feral Interactive has provided us with all of the tutorial videos we'll ever need, which are easily accessible by clicking the button in the top left corner at any time, which takes you straight to a number of tutorial videos. Once I learned the tricks, everything went so much more smoothly. I now learned how to position my units arguably even better than on PC, since Medieval 2 Mobile lets you position units in a slowed down real-time mode. This is a massive help compared to moving units one at a time and usually works great. However, sometimes things get a bit funky. As you might see down on the screen there, camera movement is another thing and is probably one of the most intuitive gameplay mechanics. You zoom in and rotate the camera as you would in any other 3D space, which works wonderfully, but I must admit that rotating the camera while also zooming in or out is quite the challenge, and I wish there was something preventing the two movements from overlapping to this extent. Despite a few quirks then, the battles in Medieval 2 play surprisingly well, honestly to a degree which I never thought possible with touch controls. I've tested many varying battles, from smaller skirmishes to larger sieges, and found that as long as I took my time and delegated commands and made good use of tactics, that the battles of Medieval 2 Mobile are a very good substitute for the full PC version. They even look great as well, especially when they're moving into battle and you're seeing a cavalry charge coming, and even though the visual detail on my phone is a bit lower than on my PC, it's honestly barely noticeable in the heat of battle. If there's one thing I need to tell you about Kingdoms on mobile, which is the Medieval 2 expansion pack of course, is that it's just damn impressive plain and simple. My favorite campaigns have always been the Crusades and Britannia campaigns, and they look just as beautiful as you'd expect. Those Middle Eastern sands are gorgeous, everything looks so crisp and colorful, and the same goes for Britannia. I've always loved how Kingdoms introduced new city and army models for certain factions, and they look as good as ever. A neat quality of life feature which is not even available on PC is that by using touch controls, we get smooth panning motions across the screen even with high frame rates, making for a much better experience actually. In my case, the game runs at a beautiful 60 FPS with awesome high-end graphics, and you can see just how smooth everything runs. Even the loading screens pass at lightning speeds. The entire game is additionally optimized for those high resolutions, and even though you certainly can run the original Kingdoms in 4K on PC, it's not exactly optimized for it. On the mobile version though, the UI has been remade and optimized, meaning every piece of text, menu window, and event art looks better than ever. What was just absolutely insane is the implementation of a feature Medieval 2 fans have been screaming for since the game's inception, the ability to view your cities during peacetime. Now this feature is actually here in all its high resolution glory, meaning no matter which campaign you play, you can now actually take that chill pill, slow down, and inspect your empire in all its non-battlefield, battlefield glory. What's even better is that this feature has been fully retrofitted into Medieval 2, meaning the main game supports it as well. Overall, even though it takes some learning, Feral has done an incredible job of porting Medieval 2 and Kingdoms to mobile touch controls. If you do have a keyboard and mouse though, it's again possible to use these to play, basically giving you that PC experience with touch possibilities. And you know, Feral even ported over the Hotseat function, which is absolutely fantastic, and I can't love them enough for it. Wow, it's been a journey. Medieval 2, Kingdoms, and the accompanying mobile versions is arguably Total War's quintessential experiences. Medieval 2 still plays great, aside from maybe some camera movement jankiness or controls, but which you can fix actually by using Medieval 2's free cam mod. I'll leave the link to that in the description. I really hope you enjoyed this video guys. Medieval 2 has been a mainstay in my Steam library for ages, and I doubt it will go away anytime soon. Let me know your thoughts on Medieval 2 in the comments, and make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Cheers!